Welcome, everyone. My name is Kirsten Howe. I'm excited to welcome you to this edition of Tips on IDing Birds with Luke Safford, our Director of Engagement and Education. We'll be talking about a lot of our wintering birds that are recently returning to Tucson. So our raptors, some ducks, and maybe some other fun grassland species. So without further ado, I'll go ahead and turn it over to Luke for the presentation.
Awesome. Thank you, Kirsten. And while y'all are on mute, this whole talk workshop includes some presentation, but most of it is supposed to be really interactive. So if you have the ability to unmute yourself, please do join in the conversation. I'll be asking for some interaction from people at different times, and hopefully some of you are extroverted enough and proactive enough to hit the unmute button and join me in the discussion. It's really meant to be a way of processing bird identification together out loud. So like many times we'll see a bird and question what it is and go through the whole process of trying to determine what it is in a very kind of like inner dialogue in our mind. And so what we want to do today is we want to verbalize that a little bit together. And I think that helps us to think through the process, to learn new questions that we can ask ourselves, and hopefully get better at being able to identify different bird species. Now, what I would say is that sometimes birds don't present themselves in a way that you're going to get a real clean ID, and that's all right. Even the, put in quotes, the best of birders don't get every bird identification right, or don't even attempt to try and identify every bird. So, this whole process of watching birds is meant to be for enjoyment, right? So, I mean, that's really part of Tucson Audubon's mission: inspire people to protect and enjoy birds. So our mission is not to help people necessarily identify birds, but definitely to enjoy them. So, identifying a bird sometimes can present frustrating different things that come up. Just kind of toss the frustration aside, just enjoy the bird. We'll, together today, we'll kind of see if we can identify everything. When you're out in the field, just remember that. Don't be frustrated, just enjoy it. If you can't identify it, it's all right. All right, so I'm gonna start sharing my screen, and remember, you're gonna hopefully participate with me in this whole process. So let me get there. Boom. Boom. All right. Tips on identifying birds. It says with Luke Safford, but really I should say with Luke Safford and the audience. All right. So I invited all of you to share different pictures with me, so that we can talk through the different birds that maybe you've had some different questions about, or think would be good to add to the conversation. And some of you sent in some pictures, so we'll look at mostly those that you all sent in. I would say that the majority of pictures that I received this week, along thinking back like the other previous 9 iterations of doing tips on identifying birds, and where I've asked people to send pictures, like the overwhelming majority is almost always raptors. So raptors can present a lot of different challenges. They're also very noticeable birds. They're big. In fact, I was finishing up a few things here this morning, looking out my window, and had hair socks flying back and forth. They caught my eye. So they're just noticeable birds, and so we have a lot of questions with those. So we're going to start with raptors, and this is a picture sent in by Scott Crabtree, one of our volunteer field trip leaders. And I really enjoy this picture because it helps us start with thinking about different questions. Whenever I see a raptor, I have an inner dialogue in my mind where one of the first questions I ask is this a buteo or an accipiter? A buteo is like a red-tailed hawk. So most or all of us are familiar with red-tailed hawks. They're bigger raptors. They got broad, wide tails. They're chunkier. They're just big. And then there's accipiters, which are like Coopers or sharp-shinned hawks. They're more slender. They tend to be smaller. They have, instead of wide, broad, shorter tails, they have long, slender tails. So long, slender tails, usually smaller in appearance. They fly a little bit differently. So like Budeos are made to kind of soar over open habitats. Accipiters are kind of, their body shape is perfect for zooming in and out of trees in the forest. So totally different types of body shapes and families of raptors. So the inner question that I always have when I see a raptor for the first time, even if it's like a really easy answer, is this a Budeo or an accipiter? Anyone want to join in and maybe answer that question with this specific bird right here? Do you think that, why is this a Budeo or why is this an accipiter?
Accipiter.
Why is that, Lisa?
Mostly because of the tail and the relative size to the branch it's sitting on. And I was looking at its head as well.
Yeah.
And it kind of looks Cooper's hawkish to me. This is always hard for me between the Sharpies and the Coopers, but
yep.
A gentleman that has access to birds and, does educational talks, he pointed out to me that a Cooper's hawk, the color on the head goes all the way back over to the nape of the neck, and with a Sharpie, it stops shorter. So anyway, that's my guess.
Actually, I'm looking just to confirm my thought process, but for some reason I thought it was the other way around with Coopers and Sharpshin with the nape color.
Okay.
Let me just make sure though.
I believe it's like Cooper's that has the break and the Sharpshin has the continuation.
Yeah, I just want to make sure I'm not making
the test. Do the test for you, Luke.
You're not, he's not on.
What's that?
Oh,
Well, the other thing that you have to think about here is that also that number 3, what's the age? This is based upon the face pattern here. This is, and of course, since I shot it, I know what the front of it looked like, but the face pattern is that of an immature. So that delineation between the crown and the nape color may be less obvious on an immature.
Right. Yeah. So I have these questions up here that as I scroll here. Okay, yeah. So we'll get to these questions here in a sec. So the Cooper's hawk has that. Now you can't see the nape. You can see the nape a little bit right there, but not too much. But the Cooper's hawk has a dark crown, and then the nape is actually light colored for the adult. And then for the Sharpshin, the dark crown goes all the way back to the nape. But as Scott said, yeah, one of the big things here is thinking about the age of the bird. So like the red-tailed hawk that caught the coot in front of us the other day, immature. And so it doesn't quite have like the full red color of the tail and has some, different things. And this one right here, Lisa's totally right. It's an accipiter because it's a long tail. Relative size to the branch, it seems pretty small. So after you kind of think about that Budeo accipiter, that specifically takes you to shape. So shape is like the best thing to look at when you first start looking at any bird, including raptors. So the tail shape, body shape, long and slender, tail long and slender. Scott, you took this picture. What time of year was it?
I had to unmute myself. It was April. I think that was the time hack on the photo. This was actually digiscoped at El Rio.
Okay.
And so it's a little.
The time of year is always helpful. So
and
it's
so
April,
it was-
which means that from about, well, I mean, you can see the Cooper's hawks stay in Tucson all year round. Sharpshins typically are not here during the breeding summer months. They'll be here most often from like October through April. So it fits for both of them. And then age, as Scott pointed out, it's a juvenile. So it'd be easier to see it's a juvenile by looking at the front of it because an adult has like red barring. But you can see by the face, it's got light colored eye, just kind of the juvenile face there. And then I like to look at the sizes of things relative. So Lisa brought that up. So like a really small bill size. Can't really see the legs on a sharpshin hawk. The legs are like almost like pencil, like really thin pencil legged sharpshin hawk, and Cooper's hawk will have a little bit bigger legs. Cooper's hawk will have a larger head. I always think, so I'll just, Scott, you agree it's a sharpshin hawk, right?
That's correct.
Okay, yeah. So you
Now,
also look at the tail shape here.
A couple things about it, of course, is that very round head and the eye placement. It tends to be more, as I recall, more central on sharpshins. But you know, we often look for a squared off tail, but you can see that this tail is very, very worn. That's probably, those feathers there are probably 9 months old, and so it's that kind of detail isn't really available here to us. But it was just because of its head shape and eye placement, I call it a sharpshin.
Yeah, the head on a sharpshin always looked kind of like just like a little bump to me. And this a Cooper's hawk, the head would just extend up more. Now I know these things are like all relative, but it just like it looks like just a little bump on the body. And yeah, so sharpshin hawk. Just because we worked the sharpshin hawk this way with a lot of different details, like it's working through this like again and again and again with all these different times that you see Coopers or sharpshins. So even so, if you may see a lot of Cooper's hawks in your yard, just study them, look at that eye placement, look at whether it's an adult or a juvenile, and think about it a little bit differently. Look at to see how big a bill looks like on a Cooper's hawk, and then you just begin to ingrain that in your mind, and then when you see something different, it'll stick out. All right, let's move on to another. So here's another one. This was I'm trying to remember who sent this in. I think it was Tony. But let's see. So Buteo or accipiter? How about someone new? Does someone new want to join in and talk about whether this might be a Buteo or an accipiter?
I think that's a Buteo.
Yeah, how come?
Kind of chunky.
You're right, Lynn. Yeah, so it's body shape, right? So the first thing we look at, I'm really glad you brought up the chunkiness of this bird, because that's really what I see too. So tail or body shape is always the first thing to look at. It's heavier. So like if you go back to this bird, it's nice and slender, long-tailed. And then you come to this one, you have more rotund, a little bit chunkier, and the tail, while it does stick out there, is just a little bit broader. So definitely a Buteo. And then how about we just look at like what else stands out? Just what is one thing that stands out to you when you see this raptor? Maybe Lynn, if you want to, what's another thing that stands out?
Well, I'm looking at kind of what I call a little sweater vest around its front, and that would says, yeah, that sort of says red tail to me.
Yeah. Boom. Lynn, you're on it. Yeah. So that's, I think, the best way of like going through ID. You look at the body shape and kind of describe the body shape in your mind. And then you can look at like, all right, what else really sticks out to me about this bird? Whether it's the color or whether it's some other, you know, eye ring, or whether it's a belly band in this case, or a vest, however you want to describe it. Every way is good. But yeah, that belly band really sticks out. And so then you can go to your bird book, whether it's a Sibley or the Coffin Field Guide or whatever it may be, and you look at the different budios and you say, oh, red-tailed hawk has that belly band. And you know, Tony Sullivan sent this in. I believe he had this over in the Chiricahuas. And you know, here in Southeast Arizona and really anywhere in the United States, the most common budio that we're going to see is red-tailed hawk. So along with asking myself whether it's a budio or an accipiter, if I say it's a budio in my mind, the next thing I say is in my mind is, why is it not a red-tailed hawk? Because like almost everything's going to be a red-tailed hawk. I mean, more often than not, it's going to be red-tailed hawk. And so like, first thing I go to, is this a red-tailed hawk? And you know, is there anything that makes me think otherwise? So, and the thing with red-tailed hawks is that they have so many different forms and everything too. It can be kind of crazy. Lynn, you have your hand up.
So what accounts for its enormous abundance? You're right. That's what you always think. So how does that happen?
Yeah. So, it's just, I don't know exactly why it happens. And if I really tried to answer that question, I'd probably be making something up. But I guess what I would say is it just happens to be the most common raptor. It has the food resources it goes after tend to be abundant. They do migrate a little bit. Some of them do. Some of them are stay where they're at. But if they do migrate, they don't migrate much further than the southern United States, or even some winter in northern states from even further north. So they're not like Swainson's hawks, where we do have a lot of Swainson's hawks in the summer, but they migrate south to Argentina in South America. And then Swainson's hawks are also like really limited to grasslands. So many of the other budios are relegated to specific habitats, and red-tailed hawks they can maneuver through a lot of different habitats. So whether it's forest or grassland, not as big a deal to them. A Swainson's hawk wouldn't be in the forest, but just in grassland. Common blackhawk, really tied to riparian areas. So red-tailed hawks are just, they maneuver around a little bit better in different habitats. Maybe that's why.
That makes a lot of sense. Thank you.
Anyone else have any other insight into that question? There's a lot of other knowledge here on this talk, so it's just, I don't hold all of it.
I was going to chime in, Luke, but I think you hit it all correctly, is that the red-tailed hawks are real generalists. They can operate in all kinds of different habitats and with different food sources, whereas things like ferruginous hawks, or as you mentioned, Swainson's, Roughlegs, all of them have different habitat requirements that are more narrow than the red-tails. They're the generalist of the budios.
Yeah, good to be a generalist.
Yeah, and Mac in the chat summed it up nicely and said adaptability.
Adaptability. We should all be so adaptable as red-tailed hawks. All right. Speaking of budios, let's just cut to the chase. This is definitely a budio. Lisa sent this picture in. Look at the habitat in the background. It's grassland habitat. So one of the, along with thinking about body shape, thinking about what bird family it's in, I like to think about what the habitat in the background is. We just talked about that, between the difference between red-tailed hawks and other budios. And so we can see it's grassland. So that tells us a few things. One, that let's think about budios that like to be in grassland. So whether it's Ferruginous hawk or Swainson's hawk, red-tailed hawks will be in grasslands as well. So, but then it probably kind of narrows out some other budios that that we might be able to cross off. So like Harris's hawk, loves Sonoran Desert. You're not going to find them out in grassland as much, if ever. Zone-tailed hawk, you can find in grassland. Common Blackhawk, probably wouldn't find in grassland. Short-tailed hawk, here in Southeast Arizona, more of a mountain bird. So you kind of think through habitats, that helps you. Lisa, you sent this picture in. What time of year was it when you took this picture? Oh, maybe Lisa's not on anymore. Well, I'll speak for Lisa since she's not on. She took this during the breeding season. And let's see, what else do we, anyone else notice anything else about this budio?
What about its yellow bill?
Yeah, that does stand out a lot, doesn't it? And there's a few other budios that kind of have that yellow bill there, but Swainson's hawk definitely, like immature Swainson's hawks will really express that really well. And the other thing I look at with this budio is it doesn't seem as chunky as the red-tailed hawk that we saw earlier. So just slightly a little bit more slender. So that kind of speaks to me why it may not be a red-tailed hawk, because that's one of the other things I think about. No breast band here, no breast or belly band. Pretty dark. So these things point to a Swainson's hawk. So I kind of a dark phase juvenile Swainson's hawk.
Lisa is back.
Hi,
Sorry.
Luke. We were
Oh,
having,
hey, Lisa.
we're having,
Operator
yeah, we're
error.
having technical difficulties. We lost
What time of year was it?
It was probably beginning of June, I think.
Perfect. That's a great time for a Swainson's hawk, isn't it?
Yeah. And this is the male of the pair that I told you that had been coming frequently. Although you have it as a juvenile, I'm surprised.
Yeah, maybe it's not. Sorry.
Yeah, I don't know. No, it's okay, because we have a pair of Swainsons that comes back to our vicinity every year. The male is the dark morph, female is a light morph. And the female is actually on the other fence post. That was a gate out into our pasture. And I did see them copulating at one point too. So I think it's a full-on adult.
Yeah, I think it is too. I get it wrong too.
Yeah. Well, and I was going to say, and pardon me for my dyslexia early on with the Sharpshinned and Coopers, because I have a tendency to flip things in my mind.
Oh,
And
yeah,
assign the wrong.
no problem.
Yeah,
I was just trying to make sure, like, I was trying to remember in my mind too, because like it's hard to keep track of all these fine details. Right.
Well, and the other thing I just wanted to add quickly with this is that the last couple of years we've had some huge outbreaks of grasshoppers. So these guys have been so happy. They spend a lot of time in our yard chasing grasshoppers. And it's really fun when they bring their youngsters back down into the yard to see how dorky the juveniles are in our yard when they're chasing grasshoppers. It's pretty fun.
They're learning.
Yeah. So.
Very cool. Thanks for sharing, Lisa.
Yep.
Yeah, here's one more of your pictures, actually. So, we think, like, we see a raptor, and I talk about, is it a budio or an accipiter? And then you cross something like this. Hey, Kirsten, you want to work through this one with me?
Sure.
What do you think? Is this a Budeon or an accipiter?
I think it's neither.
All right, you're right. Why is it neither or neither?
Oh
Why?
boy. Well, so
Sorry, I wanted to put someone on the spot. I figured you'd be
that's
a good
okay.
sport.
Yeah, I probably deserve it. I'm trying to think. Because I remember very clearly as a beginning birder, separating out hawks from other birds of prey was really difficult. So I'm trying to think I mean, definitely the stripes on the face is what jumps out to me. But I'm also trying to think like body shape. It looks pretty small. You know, those shepherd's hooks are fairly small. It's kind of squat with a really big head, which, you know, if you look at like falcons, like kestrels have giant heads. So that all leads me to a falcon.
Yeah, kind of a slender body, and then like the wings here. I mean, really kind of sharp wings. So like, you know, in flight, like when falcons are flying, they have really pointy wings, and so it's a little bit harder when it's sitting down to be able to see that. But you can see like, wow, it's really distinct wings that stick out there. So like if we go back to the Swainson sock, even though a Swainson sock is a pretty slender Buteo, it still looks heavier. The wings look heavier and not as like sickle shaped kind of.
Yeah.
And then we go to this and it's like, wow, it's like a torpedo kind of, like it's just like really sleek. And so you're right, it is neither. And it happens to be a prairie falcon, and Lisa was talking about the prairie falcon earlier. And kind of terrorizing the bird feeders. So, you know, not everything fits into the Buteo or accipiter. You'll come across vultures, you'll come across eagles. And so thinking through like those family body shapes is really important. And you begin to learn those body shapes just by being out there and thinking through it. Like, how would you describe it? There's no wrong way to describe it, whether you use the different words like sleek or slender or chunky or heavy. Like, just put your own words to them and start processing it like that.
Luke,
Yeah, Lisa?
I had a question, because what I noticed on this picture too, after I looked at it, is that the wing tips are almost as long down to the end of the tail. And I wanted to know, is that characteristic of a falcon as well?
That's a good question. I'll have to look into that. I don't know. I would think that, you know, they do have really long pointy wings, so they're going to stick out fairly long. I think that I'd have to look at other pictures to convince myself one way or the other, but I think that it seems logical because they have such long wings in flight.
Look, pretty much all of the falcons have wings that reach to the end of the tail tip. The prairie's not quite as far as the peregrines, but certainly kestrels do, merlins do, well, and jurs do too, when you actually are able to see one.
Yeah. Oh, jur falcon, that's high up there for me. I mean, it wasn't a whole lot of times, but I tried to chase jur falcons in Washington a few times and always came up empty. One of these days.
Luke, can you also talk about prairie versus peregrine?
Yeah. So let me go to let's look at peregrine falcon here real quick. Okay, so here's a peregrine. Look at the really dark head, that like it's got a dark cap that really comes down, and the body is really dark on the back, and then often it's got like this barring right here, but really dark. And then if we go back to prairie falcon, one of the things that you mentioned, Kirsten, really stands out is this like malar stripe here, and the white that's just above it. So like on a peregrine, it'd be like a whole dark head, and then a prairie falcon really white in the front, which is kind of weak streaking. When you go back to that peregrine, it's white, but it has barring, kind of more distinct barring, and is much, much darker. In flight, the best thing for a prairie falcon, you can kind of see it here a little bit, but in flight, it has like these dark armpits that really show themselves. And a peregrine falcon is usually just pretty all dark underneath. Doesn't have that really distinct armpit darkness like a prairie falcon does.
Okay, that makes sense. Thanks. And also just noticing on that peregrine falcon, as Scott pointed out, those wings are even longer, it looks like.
Yeah, they do. They come like it comes all the way to the tail there. Look at that. I never really, let's look at some other pictures of, see how dark this peregrine falcon is? Oh, look, the wings do come way down to the tail. This juvenile. Boom. You can see like underneath in flight, prairie falcon would have dark armpits right here.
Okay.
And this is just uniform dark barring all the way across. So if we change a prairie falcon here and look at what it underneath, here are those dark armpits.
That is very distinctive.
And then even in flight, you can see that dark mallard stripe with the white just above it, and the lack of the whole hood right there. Cool. And this is a good time of year. This is a good time of year. So Lisa took that picture of a prairie falcon up in Colorado. But this time of year in the winter in Tucson, you can see both prairie and peregrine falcon. They really like to be up in the towers along the Santa Cruz River. And you do have to look at each falcon to make sure you're not, well, to make sure to see if it's a prairie or a peregrine. Probably most likely it's going to be a peregrine, but prairies do come through here too.
I had a pretty good view of a prairie just the other day at Isabella Lee. It was like earlier.
Awesome.
Yeah, pretty good photos, even of it raising its wings while it was tearing something apart on the tree there. So it was nice, and a really good flyover recently along the Rillito. So they're definitely have come down or into the city because it's the feeding grounds here. Yeah.
Good falcon time right now. You know, like you said, Scott, earlier, you had a Merlin today too. So like you could probably get a 5 falcon day if you also went up over like Santa Cruz Flats to get crested caracara. But right in town, you could get kestrel and Merlin and prairie and peregrine falcon. It's a good day. Marvin, I think you're on the call with us. I had a really hard time with this one, Marvin.
Good.
You want to share a little bit first? Marvin, where did you see this at?
I saw this at Wentworth 1 month ago. It was west of the road in some of the tall dead trees. And I felt it was a Buteo. I felt it was immature.
Yep.
And then I was going back and forth with whether or not it was a broadwing or a gray. That's where I was with it. And I sent it into iNaturalist, and a couple of people identified it as broadwing, but I am troubled about the eyebrow.
Yeah. So that's a great description of like the whole process that you went through, Marvin. I think that's step by step. That was like 100% like how I would think through it. And I think I actually didn't put it on here that it, I was pretty sure the broadwing hawk now, but it's really difficult. I don't think it's a grayhawk, because a grayhawk actually looks fairly similar sometimes to a prairie falcon superficially, because a immature gray hawk will have kind of that mallard stripe too, like a pretty, like they have more of a definite that mallard stripe, which is like, if I can get my mouse to work, kind of like right here on the side of the face, kind of a dark line, and just the face has more of a pattern to it than an immature broadwing hawk. Now, immature broadwing hawk is rare to really uncommon here in Tucson, but during migration, like you said, about a month ago, early October, if you're going to have broadwing hawks come through, that's a normal time for them to come through. The white eyebrow doesn't necessarily bother me for immature broadwing. I think like when I'm looking at my Sibley guide, I noticed that in there. And what really stands out to me is like this streaking on the breast is like really heavy. It's like heavy streaking. It's not like thin. And so here's the thing with bird identification. When you're talking about striping or barring on the chest, like sometimes it's just the difference between whether it's thin streaks or heavy streaks can tell a lot between a bird. Now these are like really fine details. They can be.
You know what else stood out to me? And I just looked at broadwings on Google as well to confirm this. The eye looks so big in the head, like bigger than you would see on like relative on like a red tail, for instance. And just looking at pictures of broadwings, it looks like just their eyes proportionate to their head are really big. I don't know if that makes sense.
Yeah, talking through all those different things that you see about it is really good. It also seems a little bit, it's hard to tell size from a picture like this, but relative to the branches and everything, it seems like it's not really big and heavy like a red-tailed hawk, but it also doesn't seem slender and long like a Cooper's hawk. So it fits kind of in between that gray hawk, broadwing hawk kind of size. Do you want to add anything else, Marvin, or anyone else? Any other thoughts on this?
No, that's it. I'm fine with it.
Yeah, that's a good bird. So we've looked at a lot of hawks, a lot of raptors, perched. Let's look at one that's flying. So this raptor right here. Then we think about like what questions would we start with here? And as I process a raptor in flight, some different things I look at is wing shape. So are the wings slender or are they broad? And so like common black hawk, really, really broad. Swainson's hawk, really slender. This one kind of more intermediate, but probably more on the broader side, but not overly broad. Another thing I look at is whether there's any tail markings, whether there's any bands or this terminal band that goes like on the back edge of the tail, or any other bands on there.
Belly band.
Yeah. So
And
while there may
leading-
not be any
leading
tail
edge
markings,
Dark, yeah.
belly band. So it's just like on this bird right here, you can just barely see it, right?
Mhm.
You almost can't even see it, but there is just a slight belly band. I have to even get close enough to look at it. The other thing I look at
Leading
is,
shoulder.
Yeah, leading edge.
yeah, these shoulders right here, especially this part. This is called the patagium, and I don't know if I'm saying that right, but it's just how I think that's right. I don't know, but this area right here, that's really dark. So then you look through all these different things right here, and there's more that you can look at as well. And go into a good bird book and look at, all right, so one thing that really, there's no tail markings. They had dark patagium, just a very slight belly band, wing shape, kind of heavier. And so I look at Swainson's hawk. Swainson's hawk doesn't have these dark spots on patagium. Swainson's hawk will have a little bit of markings on the tail. Swainson's hawk will have some more slender wings.
Mhm.
So what I came up, anyone have any guesses what this bird is?
Red tail.
It's a red-tailed hawk. It's a kind of light colored red-tailed hawk. And here's the thing is, I think, so some resources to think about when it comes to raptors: Hawks at a Distance, Hawks from Every Angle, both of those by Jerry Ligori. Amazing when it comes to raptors, like they're so helpful. But then also having a good bird book like a Sibley Bird Guide. Here's, just wanted to give you a picture of, so this is what my Sibley Bird Guide, it's the second edition. It's not just the Western Eastern, but combines the Western and Eastern together. These are all red-tailed hawks. So, I mean, just if you haven't ever thought about the whole breadth of what red-tailed hawks look like, this right here gives you some idea, and there's everything in between kind of. So like, here's Southwestern red-tailed hawks. You can see the dark patagium here. You can see no markings on the tail. The juveniles have almost a whitish tail. The adults have the red tail. And then here's Eastern. They have more of a white throat than the Southwestern. This bird that we saw here kind of had a white throat. That kind of throws us off a little bit. So like, it's just, don't be overwhelmed by all this, but look at it as an opportunity to really study red-tailed hawks, which will help you with other raptors in the future. Such a good resource. Let's do something else besides raptors.
Let me just say
Or
one thing.
Scott, what do you got?
Red-tailed hawks, just real quickly, is that if you can think this page is confusing, Wheeler's new book on birds of prey of the West, he's got like 100 and some pages on red-tailed hawks in drawings and text. So it's the taxonomy is a mess.
Wow. What book is that, Scott?
It's called Birds of Prey. It's by Brian Wheeler. It's his most recent one, Birds of Prey of the West. It's one of it's in the Peterson series. I'll pull it out of my bookcase and then show it.
Well, let's look it up. Oh, okay. Yeah, we have this one at at the Nature Shop. I actually haven't looked at this one yet. Is there a new? Is 2018? Just look here. Yeah, I'll have to look at that book. I don't think I've ever looked in that one. Interesting. It's always good to look at new resources. All right, let's move through some of the, let's see. This is a really interesting one that Lisa sent in. Let's think real quickly because I want to get to some other ones, but how would we start the ID process for this bird? And so some of the things I think about it, where are you? Lisa's in Colorado. What kind of habitat? Grassland habitat, just like that Swainson's hawk. Lisa, remind me what time of year it was. Wasn't that long ago, right?
No, I would say, judging by the hollyhocks in the background, I want to say it was May.
May. Okay. Okay. So that's really helpful. So May is the time of year. I like to think through like what kind of behavior it's doing. It's kind of hard to tell behavior from a picture, but you can see it's perched on a fence post. Kind of, you think through shape. It's not a big bird, but it's kind of got a longer tail in proportion to its body. And very out in the open. So you think there's some open birds. A lot of those things lead us to shrike. Now in Colorado, depending on the time of year, you can have 2 different species of shrike up there, right? Right, Lisa? You can have northern shrike or you could have loggerhead shrike.
We generally only get the northerns in the winter, truly. There's a small overlap period, of possibilities, but the northern is actually the more common one. But that
Yeah.
was why this one was a hard one to ID, and the ID got changed twice.
We probably won't have time to get into the minutia of everything that goes into the idea of this specific bird right here. But knowing what time of year it is does really help, and it's not foolproof because some birds don't always follow the calendar as we think they should. But northern shrike being a winter bird, loggerhead shrike being more of a breeding bird. They
Right.
kind of replace each other. I remember being in Washington State, and there would be some overlap, and actually we had some loggerhead shrikes that stayed the winter in certain places in Washington State. So we'd have northern shrikes and loggerheads together.
Yeah. Well, I was just going to say, I gave it to a gentleman that I consider an expert birder.
Oh yeah.
And he
Yeah.
was the one that changed the ID. And I just wanted to follow up. He sent me some notes, but I thought the most interesting thing was, because we had talked about eBird, one of the last things he said was eBird has no northern shrikes in our county until October.
Yeah.
So he used eBird also as a resource, because he changed it to a loggerhead, which is unusual for us.
Yep.
And I will add that he also had the advantage of looking at 25 other photos I took of the bird.
Yeah. So I think this is a really good thing to think about when it comes to what time of year is. It really does help in figuring out, helping you at least move towards what species is it that I'm looking at. So when we go to, let's go to species map in eBird, and we're going to type in northern shrike, not northern shrike tit, northern shrike. And it'll show us all the different times northern shrike has been recorded, all the purple. So you can see mostly it's a northern hemisphere bird. And so right now it's year round, all years. Let's go to December, February, set the date range. All right, so they move a little bit lower, but this is, you can see here's Colorado, right? Where's Colorado? Colorado's right here. All right, stop. There we go. So you can see all the different sites here in Colorado. If we change that to June and July, what do you think is going to happen? It moves us all the way up because there are no June or July records at all in Colorado. So you can see they're all up in Alaska, Yukon territories, all this stuff, but nothing in Colorado. Now, if you change that to, let's see what it is. So you're thinking in May, let's see if there's anything in May. Now birds don't, I mean, things change. There's only one sighting, and that looks like it's in South Dakota, actually,
Nebraska.
but nothing in Colorado. So
Right. And
not saying that it couldn't be, because it, who knows, there could be a first, you could have the first, who knows, but it definitely helps. So then you have to really be like, all right, what is definite about this that it's not a loggerhead shrike? Let's see what happens when we change this to loggerhead. Whoa, there we go. But still in the area that you're at, a surprising bird. So like time of year is a really big thing when it comes to birds, and helps you kind of think through, all right, what could I be seeing? And weird things always show up, but at least it gives you a good starting point. Thanks for saying that in, Lisa. And I love seeing all the response that Ted shared with you. Pretty cool.
Before we move on, I wanted to point out that Bonnie in the chat got something important as well, that shrikes hang out. So you want to look where the bird hangs out. Bonnie writes, don't shrikes hang out on barbed wire? Here the bird is on a barbed wire wooden pillar. So that can also be a really great ID tip. So I wanted to point that out.
Yep. I love that. Thanks, Bonnie. Yeah, there's a little barbed wire. There's no little no Lincoln sparrow that he put on the barbed wire, or a little dragonfly yet, but maybe that's coming. All right. Bill sent this one in to me a little while ago. And I think, sometimes during different times of the year when we have juveniles come in of different birds, like it can be a little bit surprising to see a common bird that looks a little bit different, and it takes some time to figure out exactly what that is. So this specific bird right here, he had it in his backyard, and the question was, is it a cardinal or a Pyrrhuloxia? Normally cardinals have these red bills, pink bills that really stand out, and this one has a dark bill, doesn't have all this red in. So things that I always process in the back of my mind when I'm identifying a bird is what time of year, what kind of other birds is it interacting with? If it's a time of year when juveniles or immatures could be around, so what do juveniles and immatures look like? Thinking through those different things. And for this guy right here, one thing that I really look at is bill shape. So if we just take color out of the equation and we look at the bill shape, we have a very conical, kind of heavy bill that kind of sticks out pretty far. So this bill shape, even though it's not the color of a northern cardinal, still points to a young male northern cardinal. So it's a black bill, very, it's surprising when you see one. Even, some of us have seen a lot of young cardinals in our lifetime, and we get used to it. But still, I am still surprised every time I see a young cardinal, especially when it has the brown and red coloration. I'm like, okay, my first thought is it a cardinal or is it Pyrrhuloxia? And then I have to remember, okay, what do I have to look at? I have to look at the bill, because here's a Pyrrhuloxia, and it's got this really smushed bill. When we go back to cardinal, it's got the bill that conical, triangular, really comes out. And then the Pyrrhuloxia has that smushed bill. It's kind of curved a little bit. I don't know if smush is a real word or not, but that it really helps me, because even though the coloration is pretty close, just look at that bill. And any type of bird, really, if you can look at the bill and look at the tail, those are things that really help. All right. I promised Kirsten that I would do some ducks, and Marvin was nice enough to send in a picture of, not just a picture, but a video of some ducks. So let's watch this video and begin to think through, all right, what are we seeing here? What are we experiencing? How would we start describing these brown ducks? See the mallards in the background. It's nice to have. So if you do become frustrated with a bird identification, at least you can look to maybe something close by and be like, oh, not that horrible at bird ID. At least I can identify a mallard. So at least just start with, what you're able to do and what brings enjoyment. And then you can, if you want to, you can go to some of these other birds that are a little bit harder. So, Marvin, you want to share where you were at and maybe what you experienced? I think you're still on the call.
Yes, I was at El Rio Preserve. It was October 23rd. It was a very disappointing experience when I got there because there was no water. And then I looked all the way across to the other side from the platform, and there was a large puddle. And this is just a small segment of how many birds, how many waterfowl there were there. And most of the other were easily identified. I was able to identify. These I had a real problem with. As it turns out, this video doesn't show it, but I do have a couple of other pictures which help identify what these were. But I thought they were teals. I thought they were females. That's pretty much as far as I went.
Yeah. So you can see the size difference between these teal and the mallards. So one thing that I always kind of think about when I see waterfowl, which I love, is size. Size can be really helpful to like at least eliminating some other species and bringing it to just a couple species to think through. So they're much smaller. You can eliminate mallards, you can eliminate widgeon, you can eliminate shoveler. They're slender. These you can see that the necks are fairly long. Their bill shape is in color, so it's kind of a heavier, or maybe not heavy, but kind of a longer bill, dark. In the whole video, if we don't see any patches, like speculum patches color on any of these birds. Sometimes, there's green wing teal or blue wing teal or cinnamon teal, and sometimes seeing any color patches there will really help, but nothing's standing out. They're all brown. At this time of year in early October, that's normal. They're going through all their eclipse plumage. There you can see even the Drake mallard doesn't quite have all of its coloring yet. So they're just going through a lot of transitional phase, which makes it even more difficult sometimes to identify the species, especially blue wing and cinnamon teal. Now I eliminated green wing teal kind of right off the bat because it's got the green wing teal body shape is much more compact. The neck is shorter. The body shape is not as long and slender. The bill is much smaller on a green wing teal. They got kind of a darker face pattern with even more of a distinct eye line. But the bill shape is really important with that too. And so for me, I narrowed it down to blue wing or cinnamon teal. It's really a hard call. I would think if they were blue wing teal, they might be a little bit grayer. It's hard to kind of tell. Maybe a little bit grayer if they were blue wing teal, and maybe would have a little bit more, not real distinct. On females, it's never real distinct, but just a little bit wider right through here, like the throat and the bottom of the face, and a little bit around the bill. I think that these bills look a little bit long and broader, like a cinnamon teal. Cinnamon teal almost has almost like a bill like a shoveler.
Okay.
I could kind of go back and forth whether it's blue wing or cinnamon, but I think it's cinnamon. What you're gonna say something, Lisa?
Well, I pulled out Crossley's book, and before you started the video, at the very beginning, a couple of those birds had an echo that almost made me want to say shoveler because of the way the bill looked. And In Crossley, he's
yeah.
got some blue-winged teal that have that angle at the end of the bill that kind of makes it look more shoveler. Whereas on the cinnamons, he doesn't.
Oh, a cinnamon should have a more of a
Sure.
shoveler bill than a blue wing, I think.
Yeah. But yeah, they almost look exactly the same.
Yeah, they really do, and especially in early October. So
Yeah. You can
here's,
just say unidentified duck.
I would, I would probably spend a little bit more time with these just to, the video is really good. Yeah. So, yeah, I might just put blue wing / cinnamon teal. It's really tough. I would lean towards cinnamon. Or Marvin, did you have any thoughts? I know you're kind of thinking green wing teal too, but I think that green wing teal just has much more of a compact body.
Well, Luke, I have another video. I can send it to you. But these guys went off to the left and were walking on the ground and then flew off. And a few of them flashed the green. Some of them didn't. So it certainly could be a mixed group.
Yeah, most certainly could have been. Most certainly could have been. I didn't see any that really jumped out as green wing teal here, but that's the thing with teals. There could be all three of them here together. They very much run in different species flocks. Here's 4 cinnamon teal that are flying together. Now, this is not Marvin's picture. This is my friend Tom's picture. But you can see in flight, cinnamon teal have these blue shoulder patches and then green speculums, just like the green wing teal has a green speculum, but it's just green wing teal wouldn't have the blue shoulder patch like this. Blue wing teal also have fairly similar, but you can see their real heavy long bill here. So wing coverts, so whenever you see a duck flying, you want to look at the shoulder patches. You want to look at the speculum, which is the secondary spec here. And then you want to look at the bill shape. It's surprising, even in flight, that you can kind of see bill shape, especially when it's, whether it's small, like an American Wigeon or green wing teal, or larger, like a northern shoveler or cinnamon teal. So, yeah, going back to the video, let's watch it one more time. Brown ducks. But they don't look real compact like green wing teal. Sometimes it's okay, just put teal species. All right, we're gonna go to, it's 12:07. I'm gonna skip a few birds. I'm gonna get to my last one here, see if I can. Okay, let's do this bird right here. Scott, are you still on the call with us? You want to help me work through this bird?
I am. This is a bird from South Africa.
Oh, Noah. Oh, you're on the right track, but also wrong at the same time. So
Okay.
South America,
A
actually.
South American bird.
South America bird. Yes, I thought about putting a bird on here from South Africa to trick people, but instead I put one from South America, specifically because I wanted us to think about birds that maybe we've never seen before and think about, all right, what family is this part of? So what if I'm put in a brand new spot, which I recently was in South Africa? I tried to do some research ahead of time, but when I saw a new bird, my first thought was, what family is this? Is this a flycatcher? Is this a bushshrike? Is this a prinia? Is this a bustard? So like, at least I had something to start with. Well, what kind of family does this bird right here resemble?
I would start with the bill shape and the the tooth in the tomium. So I think this is a thropid. It's a tanager.
Yeah. So perfect. Thanks, guys. So you
I
started
can go,
with the
I
bill
can
shape.
go no farther than that.
Look at this bill shape right here. And then I'm going to go to here. Okay. So we might be more familiar with Western tanager. Look at the bill shape here. Kind of think of words to describe it. Not real heavy, but heavier than a flycatcher. Not real long, but long enough that it kind of sticks out. It's kind of straight. And then it's that same sort of bill right there. So get that in your mind. And then you go back to this one. Look, you got that not real long, but longer. It sticks out. It's straight. It's not real heavy. It's also got that same sort of body shape a little bit, where it's medium sized. Not, this one's a little more rotund than a Western tanager, but still has that same sort of look. So then once you bring it down to a family, then you can look at your bird book. At least you know where in your bird book you're going to look. That's part of the process, right? Is like you got this bird book that's, especially if you're going to a place like Ecuador where this bird was seen, so that gives a little more context to it. You're looking in your Ecuador bird book with 700 pages and 1,000 birds or whatever it is. And at least you know you can turn to the tanager page. And then once you had that body shape and that family picked out, then Scott would notice the coloration, think through, wow, there's a lot of spots on this tanager. I mean, that's one thing that really kind of speckled, spotty looking. And then you can look at all the tanagers and kind of look at the more fine points. So where are we? Wild Sumaco Lodge in Ecuador. Can we determine the bird family? Yes, we got it narrowed down to tanager. Boom. Spotted tanager. That's a beauty, isn't it?
And
Lisa, Lisa and Paul, what do you think about that?
well, I was fascinated that it's banded too. It's got a band on its leg.
Oh, I didn't even notice that. It's an escape bird.
Yeah, I just thought that was interesting, but yeah, I wouldn't have guessed any of those.
Well,
I need to get a 700-page book out and practice.
yeah. So here's the thing. So some of you will be going to new spots, new locations where you're not familiar with the birds. And whether that's, some of you might be coming from New Jersey to Southeast Arizona. You're gonna have brand new birds here. You're gonna have towhees you've never seen before. But at least you can see an Aberd's towhee and look at the body shape and like, it kind of reminds me of an Eastern towhee. And so then you can look at your bird book and move into the towhee section and see, kind of eliminate some of those other things. So that's kind of a process that I work through, and hopefully that'll be helpful for you. Yeah, so the reason I kind of handpicked this spotted tanager is that we do have a Tucson Audubon trip that's going to Ecuador next year. There is one spot left. Actually, 3 of you on this call are going there with me. So Paul, Lisa, and Scott, you guys are all signed up to go, I believe. And but yeah, if anyone is interested, there's still one more spot. Just let me know. And hopefully we'd be able to see a spotted tanager at Wild Sumaco Lodge. And we'll be able to work through those identification processes together. It'd be a lot of fun. Any last thoughts or questions before we wrap up here?
Well, we did have one question in the chat.
Okay.
Let me scroll up and find it real quickly. So Mac is asking if anyone has experience with a Swarovski optic monocular that also takes photos. I don't know anything about this. Mac, would you like to unmute and?
Yeah, it pairs with the, can I be heard? Are you hearing me?
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, I got you.
Thanks. This was great, Luke, and appreciate it. Kirsten, thank you. Yeah, so this is a Swarovski optic. It's like an 8x25. So it's a monocular, which is fine for me because I'm blind in one eye. Binoculars don't help me. And but so it has the optic, and then it's a monocular, and it also has a camera, and it pairs with the Merlin ID. So
Oh, wow.
just basically, so you take a picture, you know, and then it sends it to Merlin, and then, you know, then you have then you can download Ecuador, you know, and so take a picture, and it's it seems like cheating, but I just wondered if anybody had any experience with what the optics were like. You know, I just was curious about it.
I haven't had any experience with it.
Yeah,
No,
it's new to me.
Yeah, I haven't heard about it.
Yeah, if you're
I
on the
wouldn't-
Merlin app,
yeah.
it mentions it on the Merlin app. There's like a part for it where you can download, you know.
Do you have one of these right now, Mac, or are you?
No, I
looking-
don't. I was thinking of getting one, but I wanted to talk to somebody who had one. I wanted to try the glass, you know, myself and see how it feels. And so, yeah, I was thinking of getting one, but I don't have one.
Are you local to Tucson?
Yes.
So in March of next year, I believe Swarovski is going to be involved with the Two-Back Hawk Watch, which is
Okay.
an hour south of here. This past year, the Hawk Watch, Common Black Hawk Migration, they brought their they have a mobile experience unit that they bring and have it there out at Ron Morris Park. And so they may have one of those there for you to test out and try, or at least you would have Swarovski reps there like Clay Taylor or Tom McKenna, who would be able to answer those questions really well. I could also put you in touch with Clay or Tom too, if you'd like to find out ahead of time. But
Yeah, that'd be
yeah.
great. Thank you.
Okay. Yeah, I'll make a note of that for sure. Or send me an email to remind me.
I will.
I think you received the Zoom link from me. If you want to send me an email with those questions, and then I can connect you up with Clay or Tom, or I'll connect you with both of them.
All right. Perfect. Thank you.
Sweet.
All right, that's cool. I want to hear more about it when you've had experience with it, Mac. I'd love to know. So thank you everyone for joining us. Thanks so much, Luke, for helping us break down some of those tricky IDs. We plan on doing these sessions again next year, probably about once a quarter. So keep an eye out for the next one. And of course, we have all of our other virtual events and in-person events and field trips. So make sure you're going on our website and just seeing everything we have to offer.
Yeah, there's nothing like being out in the field and working through it together out in the field. Oh man, it's good virtually, but so much better out there.
I was gonna say yesterday at Sweetwater, we had pretty much that exact teal scenario that we just talked through. There was what we decided in the end was a blue wing teal hanging out next to the Ramada.
Hey, that's what we
you
decided
thought
it was too.
Okay. That makes me feel better. Yeah, but we got to work through it as a group, which was really fun. So definitely join us on a field trip, and we do this kind of fun group ID challenge quite often. So and I just got a request for Luke's email. Yes, I can. We'll send out a follow-up email, and I can make sure that you get Luke's email on that. So, all right. Well, thank you all so much. Oh, Luke just threw it in the chat too, so feel free to copy that. Thanks, Luke. Yeah, hope to see you back here again or in person, maybe even. Thanks again. Have a good rest of your day.
Thanks, everyone. See you guys later.
Thank you.